This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Kim Strassel has another good piece in the Wall Street Journal about the left's infrastructure, including political infrastructure that would fall under categories they like to decry on the other side. For example, dark money groups, billionaires. These are all evil by definition, according to the left, when they're talking about the Koch brothers, even the departed Koch brother, when they're talking about any instrument of conservatism, promoter of free minds and free markets. But it turns out that the left dominates when it comes to politically oriented nonprofits, when it comes to dark money groups in terms of resources. And, of course, they have the addition of all of the social justice warrior corporations that they otherwise decry, except when they're doing their bidding. And our friend Jason Chaffetz, former congressman from Utah, has a new book out on this topic called Power Grab that Strassel references in her piece in the Journal. For example, she writes, the biggest players. In 2018, nonprofit watchdog Capital Research Center analyzed grants handed out in the 2014 election year by 6 big foundations on the right, including Bradley, including the Koch Foundation, versus 6 on the left. 6 on the right versus 6 on the left. On the left, including Soros, Open Society. Liberal public policy charities, 501c3s, $7.5 billion. Conservative C3s, $2.2 billion. So, more than 3x. The $7.4 billion also dwarfed total campaign receipts to federal and state local campaigns, $7.4 to $4.1 billion, and spending that cycle by independent groups, which was only $830 million. So dominating those, that sort of money that funds those sort of foundations provides more bandwidth to drive public policy discussions. What about dark, powerful money? The left has a monopoly here too, writes Strassel, via the creation of the new sponsor model. Take Arabella Advisors, also the subject of the same Capital Research Center report. Arabella is a for-profit, privately held entity. It manages 4 generously funded liberal nonprofits, which between the years 2013 and 2017, $1.6 billion in donations. Those 4 entities, in turn, sponsor dozens of political outfits, C4s. The beauty of this arrangement for the left is that the projects don't have to disclose any information, salaries, vendors, funders, boards, nothing. They're black holes, and they're influential. Just one of the recent organizations they funded was a pop-up group, Demand Justice, a project of Arabella's 1630 Fund, which targeted Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. Almost nothing is known about Demand Justice beyond that it's run by a former Hillary Clinton campaign spokesman, Brian Fallon. Where are all the media sleuths when you need them to sniff out quote-unquote dark money? Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to, I'm not opposed, I'm supportive of C4s not having to disclose donors because of the targeting that's done and the history of targeting. There's a reason why the laws were written as they were. But I'm just saying the left, and you hear that from the socialists running for the Democrat Party's nomination, carries on about big, powerful interests and dark money and billionaires, except theirs, which dominate the other sides. They're decrying. It's what the left does almost on every topic, which is project onto their political opponents that who they actually are. Matthew Continetti has a good piece in the Washington Free Beacon, corollary to this, about corporations. What's taking place in corporate America is not a business story, but a political one. Stakeholder capitalism is another means by which elites circumvent small d democratic accountability. Many of the winners of the global economy justify their gains by adopting the rhetoric, tastes, and ideas, affiliations of the cultural milieu. The environment is inescapably center-left. One MSNBC contributor described Walmart's recent decision to stop selling ammo for certain rifles. Business is acting in a more enlightened and more agile way than the government, said an MSNBC wag. Left unsaid, writes Continenti, is why government has not, in the case, been quote-unquote enlightened or agile. The reason? Our constitutional democracy. The electorate, like it or not, continues to put in office representatives opposed to the left's agenda on gun control. The bans, the buybacks, the background checks. And these representatives, in turn, have confirmed judges who believe the Second Amendment is just important to self-governance as the First and the 14th. And this conclusion that Continenti draws, I think, is an important one. While the politicization of corporate America may have some benefits, the responsible stakeholder CEOs may have the best of intentions. They might assume what they're doing is the right thing, not only by their companies, but by their societies. What they fail to understand is that corporations acting as surrogates of one element of society or one political party will not be treated as neutral by other elements, by the other party. By believing their superior attitudes will save capitalism, our right-thinking elites are undermining its very legitimacy and increasing the severity of the ongoing populist revolt. And we see this over and over again. We're seeing it across the pond with the effort by elements of both Labour and the Tories to prevent Brexit, even though that was the clear mandate of the British people. And we've seen that in America on a whole range of matters. You got to work around the population. You got to work around the electorate's desires rather than serve them. And those companies that are playing that game, those CEOs that are playing that game, may find a market response, politically and economic, as the NFL did with their tolerance of anti-American antics on the sidelines. For more on this topic and others, we're pleased to be joined by Jeffrey Tucker, editorial director of the American Institute for Economic Research and author of the book, The Market Loves You, Why You Should Love It Back. Let it not go unrequited. Jeffrey Tucker, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Every time I hear that title, I'm happy I called it that.
Yes, it's very romantic.
No, I was charmed just hearing you say those words. I need to buy that book.
Yeah,
Where can I get it?
Yeah, exactly. You get yourself a signed copy while you're at it. So what about this? I know we're in the business of talking about free markets and market capitalism, but what about Continenti's point about these corporations that think they have a larger role to play than serving their customers and their stockholders are inadvertently undermining capitalism and providing cover to the socialists?
I don't think it's untrue. I think there's an element of naivety about these guys, really. Well, for one thing, you have in the corporate world, this desire to kind of hold the right opinions, to be fashionable, to be loved by the press, and that's really harmful, right? Because the media only loves as you pointed out, the media only loves these large corporations when they're saying, politically correct things. And so the corporate world kind of ended up training these people in this sort of social democratic ideology that actually runs contrary to all of their business ambitions. In most senses, there is a sense in which there's a long history in this country, dates back to the Progressive era, where the largest companies actually have never really been all that okay with free markets. They like regulations that keep their competitors at bay because they've already complied and they have the resources to pay the attorneys and to deal with the governing apparatus, whereas they are forever worried about being pushed out by agile upstarts. So, the more regulations that are in place, the less likely it is that anybody can displace them. And we saw this with Zuckerberg when he was testifying about Facebook. I remember there was this epic moment where some senator said, "Well, don't you think we need to be you guys need to be regulated?" And he goes, "Oh, sure, that's fine.
Yeah, come in and regulate me." Yeah, right.
Yeah, and he said, "Well, can you help us, Mr. Zuckerberg, draw up good regulations? Oh, it would be my pleasure. So
Yeah.
this is going off. I think people really do make a mistake in thinking always that big business is somehow pro-capitalism. It's not quite right, and I think in the long run it actually undermines their interest. And I think you need, to some extent, some intellectuals to explain this to these guys. That you need to be explicitly for free markets, even if it's not in your interest in the short term, even if it makes you have to compete more. In the long run, it's good for prosperity. It's good for your customer base. It's good for just human morality and decency. You should be on the right side of history, not the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Go ahead. I'm just saying it's interesting how they can be shamed to promote junk science or other sort of agenda items of the left that have little basis in fact.
Yeah.
And they can't be shamed into, as you suggest, believing in the morality of the market by which they owe their position.
Yeah, that's right. It's hell to get any one of these big shots to ever say anything friendly about markets. Actually, that's generally true in public life today. Everybody seems to be against markets, which is just the most pathetic thing I can ever imagine, because we've never lived amidst the blessings of markets more in all of human history than we do right now. There's another factor here, too. It's a slight political problem with the corporate America today. Trump is a different kind of Republican. In the old days, the Republicans could be counted on to celebrate America's biggest industries, to say, hey, isn't General Motors great? Oh, I'm for Wall Street. But Trump turned out to be a slightly different kind of guy, and he's never been a fan of technology. In fact, even during the campaign, he was complaining that Amazon's successes were coming at the expense of Main Street and so on. So he positioned himself very early on against all the new technologies and online businesses and that sort of thing, and the applications world. And he has this sort of studied, I should say, unknowingness about the entire sector. And that really raised their hackles. You see what I mean? So it's kind of gone both directions. Like Trump has done virtually nothing to court these people, and is very much in their interest then to join the Never Trump kind of movement. And so, but it's very uncomfortable for these guys, because now they're going to get in bed with people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and the rest of these parade of socialists, and that is not in their long run interest. It's really a catastrophe.
Speaking of Trump, he wrote I love it, an enlightening article called "Let Them Eat Lobsters," which was once fed to prisoners back in the day, and now it's a luxury food. But how Trump's trade war has helped you eat lobster. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Yeah. Wait. So one of the funny things about trade wars, you never really know what the effects are going to be, because the supply chain chains are so complicated and markets are so complicated. You do one little thing, you don't know what the effects are going to be. But so what happened in the case of lobsters, I only noticed this the other day because I went to the store and I love lobster. I don't know if you do.
I love it. Maybe not as much as you, but I do like it.
Well, it's just an implausible food, right? It's just this crazy little prehistoric crustacean, it looks vaguely dangerous, but it just turns out to be dripping with all this wonderful white meat, and you just stick it in a pot of boiling water, take it out and throw it on a plate and crack it open.
Now you're making me hungry.
Wow.
Okay.
I think you love lobster more than you love markets.
I do love lobster. So, and it doesn't need anything except maybe a little butter, but not even that. So anyway, I was at the store and I said, "Wait, how much do these wonderful lobsters?" He said, "Well, they're $5.80 a pound." I said, "Well, how's that possible? I mean, it means I can get a lobster dinner for less than I pay for Chipotle." He goes, "Yeah, I don't know what's going." And so what happened was that we have a certain level of lobster production, but 70% of lobster consumption in China comes from the U.S. This is a major export market for U.S. lobster industry, and a major reason why it expanded. So they had a normal season this year. But then this trade war broke out, and there's been all this retaliation. Trump taxes us, then the president of China taxes Chinese people, and they both think they're getting back at each other, but actually they're just taxing each other's citizens. It's the creepiest thing. So anyway, the lobster exports from the U.S. to China, imports into China, collapsed just dramatically, practically in business terms overnight. So we have this huge surplus of lobsters now. And, oh, by the way, China now buys all its lobsters from Canada, just in case you're...
Okay, thank you.
So this is a serious problem for the U.S. lobster industry. So we've got all these lobsters all over the place, and they're filling up tanks in grocery stores everywhere. And so you have to drop the price. It's a supply and demand issue. So the price is going down because there's a surplus of American lobsters. Meanwhile, Canada is shipping all of its lobsters out. The problem, like right now, this is glorious for me personally because I get to have a lobster every lunch and dinner forever. But the next season is going to be a problem because, of course, the profitability isn't there. People are going to be pulling in their boats. The industry is going to start shrinking. It's seriously under pressure, and these guys are really panicked. Meanwhile, the Canadian lobster industry is just loving it, right? Because now they've got a new markets for all their goods, and they're thriving. This is the kind of problem that comes with trade wars, right? I mean, just